So, all right, so back to the hypothalamus. So, when you have a mismatch between what you desire and what you're after, then the hippocampus says, oh, we don't know where we are. That's what it says. You no longer know where you are. Okay, what should you do when you don't know where you are? You should stop moving. And then you should, well, then what? You should prepare to do a lot of things. Okay, then what? Then you should explore. Well, that's where the other half of the hypothalamus comes in. That dopaminergic circuit that mediates positive emotion, right? Almost all the positive emotion that you experience in your life, the kind you like, which is hope and curiosity and expectation and surprise and that's all mediated by the dopaminergic systems. It's a major league contributor to the totality of your being, especially in a positive direction. That's rooted in the hypothalamus. And so what that means is that it's quite cool. You got your fundamental motivations, you know, your basic biological motivations. Bang, they fail. What happens? Anxiety, that's a newer system. And exploration, that's an older system. That damn exploratory system has been there forever. Now, if you look at classic hero mythology, which we're going to do in great detail, what you see is that the typical myth of humanity is we live in a place, we'll say. We have to live in a place, and the place is doing quite nicely, thank you very much. It's like the Hobbits and Frodo. Right, the first one, what was it called? The Hobbit. Yeah, the Hobbit. Okay, so you got the little Shire there, right? It's all peaceful. It's full of these little people who are a little on the arrogant side. They're kind of dopey. They have no idea what the hell's going on in the outside world, but they think that's okay. They think, peculiar people are concerned about that sort of thing. They got their little happy paradise going. They live a long time. They eat a lot. They party a lot. Unbeknownst to them, which is a very interesting feature of the story, the only reason they have any peace at all is because they are descendants of old kings continually patrolling the borders, right? Those are the Striders. Aragorn, he's the member of the race of old kings who patrols the borders. Well, those are ancestral figures. It's like you can all sit here at your little happy paradise, but the only reason you can do it is because the sons of great kings have put borders around your kingdom. And you can think, it's funny because in the Hobbits basically despise Strider. They're very, very suspicious of him. He's kind of dirty and dusty, and he looks like he's been banged around all over the world. He's sort of like a tramp. It's like they don't know he's the son of a great king. Good thing for them that he is, however. Okay, so then you've got the little Shire, and what happens? Evil things are stirring. And what is it? Well, fundamentally, it's a great dragon. Well, that's a snake, except it's like meta snake, It's snake with fire. And you can be sure that fire was not only one of our greatest allies, but one of our greatest enemies, especially when we lived on the veldt in Africa. Because that thing would burn now and then, and so get the hell away from that. So anyways, so one hobbit who's woken up by a wizard, right? The wizard is a symbol of the self from the Jungian perspective. So there's one hobbit who's a little bit more creative and exploratory than the rest, and everybody has a little respect for him, but they think he's pretty damn peculiar. He decides that he's going to, under the tutelage of the wizard, he's going to go check out this dragon. So he leaves the borders and he goes out into the unknown. And then the rest of it is an adventure. And one of the things that's very interesting, again from a Jungian perspective, is that what does the hobbit have to become in order to conquer the dragon? A thief. Now that's pretty weird, eh? Because you think, hey man, this guy's out to be a hero, so he should be a hero. It's like, no. He turns into a thief. Why? Well, it's because if you're going to conquer a dragon, you better be a hell of a lot tougher than you are naive. And so, partly what happens is that for the hobbit to muster up the forces that are necessary for him to confront something that is that fundamental, he has to transcend his coward, what would you call it? The cowardice that he describes as morality. Okay, so Nietzsche, for example. Nietzsche is often viewed as a critic of morality. It's like, that's not true. Because Nietzsche identifies morality with cowardice. But that's not what he does. What Nietzsche says is this. If you're too afraid to do something, so you won't do it, then you'll say that the reason that you don't do it is because you're moral. That's not the reason. The reason is you're too damn afraid to do it. You might want to, but you're too afraid. That doesn't make you moral. So what happens to the Hobbit, for example, is once he gets outside the kingdom, he has to develop a whole array of potentials that he never developed before, because they were either not necessary in his civilized place, or because they were forbidden as immoral by the cultural situation that he grew up in. You say, well, you have to be touched by the snake in order to defeat the snake. Where else have you seen that motif? It's Harry Potter, right? I mean, Harry Potter's a strange character because he's not obedient, not at all. In fact, he's quite disobedient. But he breaks the rules in the service of higher morality. And the higher morality is that he faces down the dragon that paralyzes you, and he frees the virgin. That's what happens with Ginny. Virginia, virgin. It's the retelling of St. George and the Dragon. And interestingly enough, the reason that Harry Potter revivifies is because Dumbledore's phoenix comes by and cries in his wounds. Well, the phoenix is something that dies and is reborn. And so the meta-myth underlying the second volume of the Harry Potter series is that the part of you that sustains you through an encounter with the dragon that paralyzes is the part of you that can die and be reborn. And what that means in a sense is, if you're wrong about something and you fall into a pit, then you should let go of what you're wrong about so that something new can arise. And so it's better to be the thing that transforms in response to catastrophe than it is the thing that's static. Yeah, and that's another big discovery of people. We're agents of transformation, which is of course why kids are so bloody obsessed with magicians and wizards who are agents of transformation. You know, and that's all embedded in the mythology. It's all acted out. Nobody understands this sort of thing to speak of. Certainly the kids don't. It just hits them, you know, because they can recognize the pattern. They know that there's something magic about them, even though they're living in a cupboard in a London suburb where everything is boring and flat and under control. That's not the real world. And it's true, it's not.
Is that why we have more patience for people, including criminals, who who admit their crime and do their punishment and redeem themselves?
Oh, not only more patience, we often have admiration for them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, how many movies feature a attractive bad guy? Well, or for that matter, an attractive bad woman. You know, it's like, it's because of the Nietzschean observation. The people who are good aren't good, they're just cowards. Whereas the guy who's bad, well, at least he's not a coward. Well, then you might say, well, you know, yeah, he could stop being a coward and also become a good guy. But, I mean, that's often, but not always, the actual plot of the movie. Because that's the redemption of the bad guy. You know, it's also what women fantasize about in relationship to the Beauty and Beast mythology. They don't want the coward. He's the guy that wants to be the friend. It's complete bullshit. The bad guy's an advance over that, but not a big enough advance because he's a bad guy. The best thing you want is a civilized bad guy. It's like, that's what you want. Well, no wonder, because it's only a civilized bad guy that's going to be capable of dealing with the dragons. It's right. Lloyd Axworthy, when he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Canada, when all the massacres were going on in Yugoslavia, it was front page news at one point. It was during the ethnic cleansings. He said, I don't have the imagination for that kind of evil. It's like, oh, well, that's really impressive, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs. Did you ever read about the Holocaust? It's like, it's time to wake up a little bit. These things happen. But he said it as a moral claim. I just couldn't imagine that sort of thing happening. It's like, well, you're a little on the naive side, aren't you? And parading that around as morality is not a reasonable thing to do when you also happen to be Minister of Foreign Affairs. It's like you should be looking out for the snakes all the time, because they're definitely out there. And Milosevic was definitely one of them. And so, if a naive person meets someone like that, the naive person loses. And that's not good, because there are lots of people like that, and it'd be better if they didn't win. So, okay. So anyways, the hypothalamic, the fact that the exploratory circuitry is actually embedded right into the hypothalamus, way down there with like lust and thirst and hunger. It's so great because it shows you how the mythology works. It basically says, okay, here's a bunch of things you're doing, now and then something will go wrong. Okay, you need a system to deal with things when they go wrong. What's the system? Well, it might kill you. Bang. Better have some pain and anxiety to protect you. Well, you better figure out what it is. Okay, you better have an exploratory system so that you can go out there and gather some more information. Well, that's the human story. Gather information in the face of danger. That's the human story. That's what we do. So, and that's the hero myth. And the hero myth is redemptive, and that's because it is redemptive. That is what works, or at least that's what we've staked our being on. I mean, who knows? Maybe all this exploration will just get us in trouble. I mean, that's another part of Genesis, right? Poke around and see what happens. Well, you know, you're doing that all the time. You're in your little paradise, beetling away all happily, and then you just can't stop yourself from pulling on a thread somewhere. And then you find out, oh my God, you know, maybe that's when you get suspicious about your partner cheating on you. It's like, I think maybe this person's cheating on me. And you can't leave it alone. You can't leave it alone. You got to go look at the snake. It's like, bang, turns out it's there. Down you go into the underworld. Right, and you might think, well, maybe ignorance, you know, maybe the bliss of ignorance would have been better. Well, it's not like psychologists don't tell you that. All those positive illusion people, that's their whole shtick. It's right, it's better to be a little bit dumb about how things work, because otherwise there's no way you can be happy. It's like, that's an idiotic theory on two accounts. A, happy isn't the point, and B, dumb is not the goal. So, you know, it's so ignorant that it's actually corrupt, which is really saying something, because you have to be pretty damn ignorant before you get to corrupt. So, it's a hell of a thing to teach people. You know, you have to delude yourself in a minor way, otherwise you can't stand being alive. Oh my God, that's awful. That's really awful. It's like, here's a different story. Maybe you're tough enough to open your eyes. That'd be a much better story. And it's possible too, because people are really, really, really tough. It's just they live in these little protected places, you know, and they never get out there and hammer themselves out against the world, so they never discover that they're tough. But, you know, and you might think, well, that's your opinion. It's like, no, it's not my damn opinion. We know that if you take someone who's naive and paralyzed by anxiety, and you put them in psychotherapy, and you expose them to the things that they're afraid of or disgusted by and avoiding, that it isn't that they get less afraid. They get more confident. And that's what generalizes, you know. So, you know, if you bring someone who's got a mouse phobia and you treat the mouse phobia, then they're not afraid of a bunch of other things. Why does that happen? Well, they weren't afraid of the damn mouse. They're afraid of their own inadequacy. And then you teach them that they don't have to be afraid, and they think, hey, I don't have to be afraid. And then they're not afraid of a whole bunch of things. And so you get generalization from behavioral exposure. And so it isn't, there's no question about whether or not exposure to the things that you avoid is curative. It's the fundamental axiom of psychotherapy. You know, that and figuring out what you're going to do with your future. But even in psychoanalysis, it's face what threatens you, right? It's just that the psychoanalysts tend to go after past traumas. It doesn't matter as far as your brain is concerned. A dangerous thing in the past is exactly the same thing as a dangerous thing in the present. And it seems to be partly because the amygdala doesn't have any sense of time. And you know, it's interesting because one of the things Jung observed was that there's no time in the collective unconscious. It's like everything is an eternal now. So let's say you got traumatized when you were a kid, your amygdala grows. Maybe you got bit by a spider or some damn thing. It's like you're afraid of that spider then, and now, and in the future. It's the same. It's outside of time. The hippocampus is the thing that's dealing with time. So, you know, if you really learn a lesson, it's supposed to be timeless. Well, you know, you can still help people overcome their phobias, but you can't get their damn amygdala to shrink again. So, you can just get it back under control. Okay, so that's pretty cool.